アップライトピアノって最低でも50万はするのよ。
Which, with current exchange rates, would come out to, in US dollars, oh. COVID did quite the number to Japan. Cold opener for this one was actually the ending to the tie-in movie for the series. Yeah, we reached the point where we could at least get some payoff for that mediocre film.
どうしたの急に。
I mean, we've had to wait like 4 months just to resolve this storyline. Doremi explained the situation for those who didn't see the film, which was probably a decent chunk of their audience, and thankfully, I think most viewers were able to follow along with the story with just these additional bits of monologue. Also, this is just a minor touch, but I do like how Doremi lined up their shoes after Pop just kind of rushed into the house without taking them off properly. It's a tiny detail, but it does show that at least most of our care and attention is currently on Pop, so good stuff. But yeah, following up on the one decent plot line from that movie, Pop wanted to learn how to play the piano. The only minor issue with that was that they no longer owned one after they had sold it off to cover a down payment on their family's car. Fortunately, they had saved up since then, so they should have been able to get a new one, but...
ついに我が家にも新しい車がやってくるぞ
Curse you, Elon! Yeah, they were just a step too slow, and would need at least another 500k yen to get a decent upright piano, which in US dollars, back then, rather than with current exchange rates, would have been closer to just 5k, which is still a hefty price tag. Thus, this kids show that has already brought up concepts like down payments, also talked about cash advancements, which, yeah, I don't know about you, but I didn't even learn about what loans were until I reached my early teens. Not saying this is either really a pro or con for this episode, it's just kind of interesting that they're actually talking about this kind of stuff. Well, I did take some advice from this pink sauce lady, so I'm sure it'll all work out okay. I also did genuinely like how everyone was supporting Pop's desire to learn how to play the piano, with not only Mr. Harakaze considering selling his brand new car, but also Doremi using her own magic to turn her toy piano into at least somewhat of a real piano. Though really, the solution to all of this should have been to have just turned it into Schroeder's piano. Granted, she might have had to deal with Lucy.
You broke both your arms and could never play the piano. Wouldn't that be romantic?
Peanuts are a lot darker than you remember. Also, of course, the first thing they would try to practice playing would be Doremi Fa Sol La Ti. Anyway, Mr. Harakaze tried to offer his journalistic skills in fishing to several publishers, but none of them were willing to provide advances because, let's be honest here, they're not running the most lucrative of businesses. Fortunately, Hazuki's family was still stinking rich, and even had an extra piano just lying around since their daughter had taken more to the violin. Thus, they were willing to give it away, but Mrs. Harakaze turned it down since they didn't want to trouble them too much, which, come on lady, you're surrounded by a bunch of 1%ers in this neighborhood, you might as well at least take a little advantage of them. Fortunately, they did come up with a pretty clever compromise by at least letting Pop practice playing a real, or at least magically transmuted piano at the Mahodo. Seriously, the magic in this show is pretty damn OP. But yeah, even Majoriko was being helpful by not only letting them put it in her room, but also made it dirty.
Oh, okay. What?
I mean, she said it was meant to get around Mrs. Harakaze's concerns about taking advantage of others by making it look more like a cheap hand-me-down, but then is she supposed to just ignore the fact that it's still perfectly tuned? I'm just saying, y'all are adding a few extra steps that you don't really need. But yeah, they once again had Aiko pose as Hana's mother to convince the retired pianist that it was a donation to the Mahodo that they could use to practice with. Then this led to a nice moment where she played a little tune with some really good hand animation. I mean, me personally, I don't know that much about pianos. I think my parents told me that they tried to sign me up for lessons, and I failed almost instantly. Still, I can appreciate moments where the characters are clearly getting into a passion like piano playing here. On that note, I'd imagine Hana was playing better than I ever did, as she at least had some enthusiasm in it. We also learned that Doremi once tried to calm down a still infant Pop by playing the piano, and wait, she's not playing it here, she's just relying on the background music.
You were just making it look like you were playing. You're a phony!
But yeah, I did like how this is basically a tale where things have kind of come full circle, with Pop being the one who unintentionally got Doremi into playing the piano, and when the elder sister couldn't follow through with her early passion due to traumatic sensory overload, the little sister managed to pick up the pieces.
心の隅っこの方で何か引っかかってたんだよね。
Anyway, after striking out everywhere he went, and yet still promising his daughter a brand new piano, we were introduced to kind of an out-of-nowhere plot point where Mr. Harakaze just so happened to remember he had a valuable fishing rod that he had gotten from some dude named Scott Kruger. We didn't really learn who this guy with some of the thickest English I've ever heard was, and I guess we were supposed to assume that he was just some famous fisherman whose signature on a simple bamboo rod would be enough to sell it for a high price. I mean, I'm not asking for this guy's whole backstory or anything. In fact, it is more important for this story to establish Mr. Harakaze's connection with him and the rod, which you really can't do like at the very end of an episode. Hell, I think they could have made a little more time to build this up a little more properly. They could have removed a few scenes about his new car that was never going to be sold anyway, and this superfluous bit of him trying to win the lottery, which was just stupid anyway, and then maybe in passing have him talk about the rod and/or Kruger. Just something to make this plot point feel a little less out of nowhere is all I'm asking. Fortunately, it was kind of made up for with this flashback in which he explained how difficult of a decision it was for his wife to sell off her precious piano. But she did it knowing that it had become a trigger for Doremi's trauma, which took priority over all else. And yet, ironically, the empty space in their house made Doremi feel like she had unfinished business with the instrument that she failed at. It's all really good stuff that shows the bonds between all of the members of the Harakaze family, with all of them trying to look out for each other, and yet still kind of hurting each other even when they are making good choices, as they do share in each other's pains. Anyway, the next day, Mr. Harakaze went back to one of the fishing magazine publishers.
編集長は会議中ですけど。
Okay, great. Now everyone, empty your goddamn pockets. No, of course, he tried to sell the rod for the 500,000 yen that they needed, though apparently this thing could be sold for double that, which, yeah, unless this was signed by Ernest Hemingway, I have a hard time believing that. Again, you gotta establish these things just a little better. Unfortunately, the editor-in-chief agreed and didn't take the rod, and instead just gave Mr. Harakaze the advance he wanted. Then with that, the episode ended with the Harakazes filling the empty space in their house with a brand new piano, and Doremi even considering giving the instrument a second chance. Yeah, this was wholesome as all hell, and really damn good. Again, for a season that's supposed to put more of an emphasis on the theme of family, it is just nice to get an easier slice-of-life episode about the family of the title character. Really, I only have very minor nitpicks to what's otherwise a perfect episode, and a much better follow-up to a pretty mid film. Another thing that was really good in this one were definitely the visuals. I mean, put aside the obvious leftovers from the film, which would be kind of cheap if we were to count them, the actual direction here was just beautiful, with some really nice warm colors that set the mood for some of the more melancholic scenes, which of course an episode like this would have plenty of. Mrs. Harakaze just has one of the more compelling backstories in the show, as a mother who does sacrifice a lot for her family. And while it can be painful in the moment, it is also very clear that she holds no regrets for her choices, until they need to rebuy something that they had already sold off. This then got her husband in on the story a little more than usual, and while I'm still not a fan of his stiff voice acting, his determination to support his family outside of buying lottery tickets was commendable. All the while, it was nice to know that after her uncharacteristic dickishness in the movie, Doremi went back to being a good big sister to Pop, even coming up with some clever workarounds to let her play the piano even outside of their home. And in general, this episode was mostly well written, except for some minor hiccups, like the fishing rod kind of coming out of nowhere, and us expected to feel bad for Mr. Harakaze when he had to sell it off. It's really no big deal, just something that could have easily been fixed with a little more establishment early on. Because otherwise, this was overall a fantastic, emotional episode that was leagues better than the rush mess it stemmed from. Pianos can be pretty damn expensive, but a dollar smile is the biggest payment advance you can ask for. Hope everyone's having a nice week so far, and can look to maybe a few more videos on this little channel. Part 1 of the Max Heart review will probably be out sometime in December, and afterwards, we might try some different content in between. Look forward to it. And until next time, though, for now, my friends, and hey, can you play Freebird?